For 4 years that I was with Sophia, everyone thought I was about to marry her. But right at this crucial moment, my younger brother David, who went abroad after getting married, suddenly got divorced and returned to the country. Sophia went to pick him up at the airport in person, accompanied him to various occasions, and even didn't come home at night. Everyone was waiting to see me make a fool of myself, but I secretly breathed a sigh of relief, thinking to myself, scared me to death. Who would want to marry her? Let's start the story. If you like it, remember to subscribe. On the day David returned to the country, Sophia was still in my bed. I pinched her waist, held her hands, and pinned her to the bed. Her face was flushed, and it was obvious that she was aroused. But just then, that exclusive ringtone rang. Sophia seemed to wake up from a dream and quickly broke free like a fish. I grabbed her hand and asked, "Where are you going?" She pushed my hand away and said, "David called me. There must be something urgent." Sophia answered the phone in a hurry and didn't even have time to put on her shoes. I didn't know what was said on the other side, but her originally furrowed brows gradually relaxed, and she said softly, "Don't do this again. Wait for me. I'll be there right away." When Sophia went to take a shower in the bathroom, I lay on the bed lost in thought. I didn't care what David said to Sophia. I was just thinking about that ringtone. Before David went abroad, he took Sophia's phone and set that exclusive ringtone. He said to Sophia, "You're not allowed to change this ringtone. When you hear it, you'll think of me." But no matter how much Sophia begged him to stay, David still resolutely went abroad alone. That day, Sophia drank a lot of wine and, as if in a fit of pique, threw her phone on the ground, shattering the screen. But then she regretted it and cried over the phone all night, her eyes filled with hatred and helplessness. Later, she got a new phone. For some reason, she suddenly wanted to find that exclusive ringtone again. At first, she just wanted to listen to it one more time and then completely say goodbye to the past. However, she couldn't remember what that ringtone was no matter how hard she tried. On countless nights, she lay on the bed listening to songs one by one, like looking for a needle in a haystack, hoping that one day she would hear that familiar melody. This seemed to have become her obsession, and she couldn't let it go. And just now, that exclusive ringtone suddenly rang, waking her up and also waking me up. Had Sophia unknowingly found that ringtone? Sophia came out quickly. As she was getting dressed, she said to me, "I'm going out. Don't wait for me." I called out to her and said, "Sophia, let's stop here." My relationship with Sophia had always been vague. At first, someone asked her, "Are you dating James?" She shook her head and said, "Just sex partners." I didn't comment on this. After all, what Sophia said was right. But 2 years later, when Sophia introduced me to others, she said, "This is my boyfriend." I was stunned for a moment but didn't ask more. Half a year ago, Sophia suddenly asked me if I would marry her. I nodded and proposed to her in a carefully arranged scene. She smiled brightly that day, and I was also caught up in that beautiful illusion. Until I accidentally heard her conversation with her best friend. Her best friend asked her in shock, "Are you serious?" Sophia smiled non-committally. That smile was both helpless and seemed like a compromise to fate. She said, "Spending my life with James like this might not be so bad." I suddenly felt uneasy, becoming more and more uneasy day after day, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. It wasn't until David made this call that I suddenly felt relieved. So, I didn't want to marry Sophia after all. Hearing me say this, Sophia's originally flustered expression suddenly froze. She asked, "What did you say?" But the next second, her face was filled with anger. She looked at me with a heavy gaze, but I didn't care at all. So, I smiled at her and said, "It's over. We're done." I always thought she would never show that expression again. The eyes filled with hatred and helplessness alternated in her eyes, just like the night David left. But this time, she didn't shed tears. She just looked at me, her eyes as if she wanted to tear me apart. After a moment, Sophia turned around and chose to leave, leaving me with only a cold back that was getting farther and farther away and a voice so soft that it was almost inaudible. "Okay then." I learned about David's return from a friend, along with the news of his divorce. I heard that the young model he married cheated on him. She said it was for art, having sex with the photographer. In the end, not only did she cuckold David, but she also ran away with his money. I thought it was funny, and I couldn't help but think of when David was determined to marry that young model and went abroad with her resolutely. He said she was his muse, the purest light in the world, and that we ordinary people looked at people with prejudice, didn't understand love, and didn't understand the concept of lasting forever. But David couldn't see that what sustained their love was the high amount living expenses transferred to him by the family every month, and actually, I was the one who earned that money. But all this didn't matter anymore. 3 days had passed since I told Sophia it was over. I sent her a message, asking her when she would come to pick up her things, but she ignored me. I then contacted Sophia's assistant, asking the assistant to come and deal with it, but the assistant stammered and kept making excuses. So, I changed the door lock and didn't bother to care anymore. I bought this house here for Sophia. She said she liked the coziness of the river flowing slowly under the bridge every morning, so I accompanied her to live on the outskirts of the city where the transportation was inconvenient. Now that I've moved back to the large flat near the company, I realize how stupid I was before. Isn't it wonderful to sleep for an extra half hour? Back at the company, I suddenly remembered that there was a banquet in the evening. Originally, Sophia and I were supposed to attend it together, but now I had to find someone at the last minute. So, I asked my assistant to arrange someone to accompany me to the evening banquet. The assistant looked confused and asked, "Aren't you going with Sophia?" I said, "She should be going with someone else." The assistant's face changed several times, and I didn't know what she was imagining. After a moment, she said indignantly, "Boss, don't worry. I'll definitely arrange the best one." But the next second, she said to me with an embarrassed face, "Boss, these 2 days are special festivals. No one is taking orders. How about making do?" I was speechless and asked, "How do you make do?" She said tentatively, "Currently, only a part-time girl named Olivia is willing to take the order." And I saw in Olivia's profile below that she loves boxing and calls herself Violent Chestnut Lady, a master-level female boxer. "What do you think, boss?" I asked helplessly, "Do I have any other choice?" The assistant shook her head and looked at me innocently. I had no choice. What else could I do? It was a redundant question. But when I saw Olivia, I was shocked. How should I put it? Olivia had a curvy figure, bright eyes, a fair and delicate face, and a pair of long legs with smooth lines. Her body was fleshy and firm, yet she was graceful, making people's hearts flutter. This was no making do. She was simply a rare gem among part-timers, with a proper goddess demeanor. If only Olivia wasn't so talkative. I should have liked this part-time girl. Along the way, I heard Olivia keep mumbling, "We come from a proper company and can't take jobs with special services. Of course, it's not that we never take them, but that's a different price. And Sophia, she won't complain about me, will she? I have a 99.9% favorable rating. If I get complained about, I'll lose my bonus. Of course, all these can be solved. If you really want it that way." Shut up. I couldn't bear it anymore and gritted my teeth and spat out these 2 words. Olivia looked innocent and calmly finished what she was saying, "Extra money." I took a deep breath and said, "Be quiet, or I'll complain about you. Of course, if you perform well, I'll give you a 5-digit bonus afterwards." Olivia gave a satisfied okay gesture and said, "Don't worry. I'm professional." Olivia had sharp eyes. As soon as we entered the door, she said, "Fuck." My brows twitched, and I shouted angrily, "No swearing." Olivia pointed not far away and said to me, "Your fiancé is over there." Of course, if it was just my fiancé, that wouldn't be enough to make her say fuck. The main thing was that there was a man standing next to my fiancé, and my fiancé was holding his arm, smiling charmingly. Olivia had a gossipy look on her face and said, "You've been cheated on." I was speechless and replied helplessly, "That's my brother." Olivia became even more excited, and her smile almost couldn't hold up. She said, "Wow, so it's betrayal by the 2 closest people." I don't know if it was because of Olivia's joke or because I was already indifferent, but looking at Sophia and David, I didn't feel much. Of course, I wasn't going to go up and say hello either. But David took the initiative to come over. "Brother, long time no see. I've been back in the country for so many days, and I finally see you. Why don't you answer my calls?" I was speechless. David was so sarcastic. It was clearly insinuating that I didn't get along well with him and wasn't a loving brother. David continued, "Mom and Dad also miss you very much. When will you go home for a meal? They'll definitely be very happy." This was really something. It meant that I didn't have a good relationship with my parents and never went home to see them, making me an unfilial son. Seeing that I didn't speak, David continued to exaggerate, "I even brought you a gift. Please don't be angry with your little brother anymore. Bastard. This guy really hasn't changed his ways." He was secretly mocking me for being petty and having no vision. Since we were kids, this guy was like this. Clearly, he made mistakes, and after he said he was wrong, everyone thought it was my fault. As I grew up, I gradually realized that David was really a jerk. So, I said, "Answer your call? When did you call me?" "Little brother, your memory isn't so good, is it? Could it be that you don't remember your brother's phone number, but you remember your former sister-in-law's phone number?" I gritted my teeth when I said sister-in-law, and it really disgusted me. People around were gradually attracted by the situation here and started whispering. Just then, Olivia spoke up and started adding fuel to the fire. Be angry with you? What did you do to James? Don't be ambiguous. Tell us what happened. Also, what do you mean by saying you brought a gift so don't be angry with you? Is this an apology or sarcasm? If it's sarcasm, let's lay everything out on the table and see whose problem it really is. If it's an apology, then say sorry honestly. Only after you say sorry can he consider saying it's okay. After all, if you're a criminal who burns, kills, and loots, then we can only make a tough decision and do the right thing. Olivia spoke so fast that David couldn't get a word in several times. It wasn't until Sophia coldly asked, "Who are you?" Sophia's eyes were sharp, scanning from Olivia to me, and finally landing on the hand where Olivia was holding my arm. I directly met her gaze, grabbed Olivia's hand, and took half a step forward, saying, "So, miss, who are you?" I had already prepared for a fight and was going to compete with her, but Olivia suddenly threw me from the left to the right. Fuck! I was completely stunned. Olivia actually threw me from the left to the right like throwing garbage. For a moment, I felt like my body was flying. How could this girl be so strong? At this time, I suddenly remembered what the assistant said: loves boxing, violent chestnut lady, master-level female boxer. Could Olivia not be a metaphor, but really a boxer? Well, this little girl has something. Sophia stared at Olivia fiercely and said, "Take your hand off." Olivia raised her chin, like a proud peacock. She deliberately intertwined her fingers with mine and said coquettishly, "This is a law-abiding society. You can't harass someone else's male companion." Sophia said emotionally, "I'm his." Just as she was about to blurt out fiancé, David called out to her, "Sophia." David looked flustered, tightly grasping Sophia's arm, his face looking ugly. Sophia glanced at me, and then immediately turned her gaze back to David. She suppressed all her resentment and let David hold her hand in his palm, then turned around and left. That night, except for the conflict with Sophia and David, Olivia performed very professionally. She said her face was almost stiff from smiling, and she had to keep a gentle and graceful smile. It was really difficult. Olivia then asked me, "Are you also very tired?" I'm really speechless. I have to accompany you to drink, smile, and chat, and in order to maintain your face, I can only eat a little bit very restrainedly. I feel like my soul has been drained. Hearing this, I really wanted to slap Olivia. She ate a whole 4 Peruvian roast chickens, okay? I didn't have any face left. Couldn't she really see that everyone was looking at us in shock? But I had to admit that I was really tired. I sent Olivia a generous bonus and said I would invite her again next time. Olivia was sent home by me with a sullen face. At the same time, Olivia emphasized again and again, "I'm a decent person." I perfunctorily nodded and said, okay. I'll introduce business to you next time." After seeing Olivia off, I slowly went home. As soon as I went upstairs, I saw Sophia. She stood there expressionlessly, looking at me coldly. I didn't want to pay attention to her and tried to walk past her sideways, but she threw herself into my arms, holding me tightly and not letting go. I reached out to break her arms around me, but Sophia ignored me and stood on tiptoe to kiss me. I was shocked and pushed her hard, shouting, "Get away." Sophia staggered back, but as if she didn't hear me, she came up again. I crossed my arm and grabbed her collar, blocking her away by pressing against her collarbone. Sophia couldn't believe it. She took a step back, her eyes venomous, and said, "You pushed me? How dare you push me? Weren't you the one full of lust, like a horny male dog, who insisted on having sex with me?" Even though I had said it was over, even though I thought I had let go, my heart still suddenly contracted, as if it stopped beating for a few seconds. The taste of iron filled my mouth. So, all this time, this was what I was like in Sophia's eyes. I nodded and said, "Yes, that's right. I was full of lust, and I took the initiative. But so what? Did I force you? We were having a consensual relationship. Now that I say it's over, it's over. You can't touch me again." Sophia and I were childhood sweethearts. We were born in the same year, and I was 3 months older than her. Our two families had business dealings, and our parents were friends. Even our houses were next to each other. Sophia was the first person I fell in love with when I was young, but she didn't like me. She liked David, who was sunny and cheerful, like a little sun. As for me, I was dull, boring, and lifeless. Some people even suspected that David and I weren't real brothers. They often said that since we didn't even have the same last name, James might be an adopted child or even a bastard. Once, such rumors were widespread. After hearing this, Sophia, contrary to her usual self, forced David to apologize to me. David said with a sly smile, "Brother, don't be angry. It was just a joke among a few friends. Who knew it was spread by someone with ill intentions? I thought Sophia did it for me, but later I found out it was for David, so that others wouldn't think David's father was a playboy." Sophia had always been deeply in love with David. So, after David met his true love, got married in a flash, and went abroad, Sophia became a desperate trapped animal, wanting to find a substitute for David. And that's when I took the opportunity and made that proposal to her. Sophia said, "I don't like you." I said, "We can have a relationship without talking about feelings." I never needed Sophia to like me. I was with her not for love to grow over time. It was just a matter of weighing the pros and cons and getting what we each needed. David had been back in the country for half a month. During these half a month, Sophia had been by his side all the time, accompanying him to various occasions and helping him expand his network. And my mother finally seemed to remember my existence. She called me and immediately started scolding, "David has been back in the country for so long, and you not only don't help him, but you don't even make a single phone call. James, do you still consider yourself part of the family? This is hilarious. It's as if just because I consider myself part of the family, they'll treat me the same way." I replied perfunctorily, "What's up? If there's nothing, I'm hanging up." My mom knows my temper well after all. Despite being seething with anger, she got to the point, "Come back for dinner tonight. I need to talk to you. Also, bring back the cufflinks you bought at the auction last time. David will surely love them." I chuckled softly and hung up the phone. They really have the nerve to ask. Who wouldn't love those canary diamond cufflinks worth $3 million? Normally, I shouldn't attend such a malicious banquet. But I know that if I don't go tonight, my mom will come to my company tomorrow, just like when David was rebelliously determined to marry that young model. My mom stormed into the company, slapped me, and demanded to know why I didn't keep David in line and let him get involved with such a person. However, I promptly returned the slap to David's face and snapped, "I'm asking you. When did you start hooking up with such a shady person?" When I got home, they had already started eating. The three-member family was enjoying themselves, and Sophia was there too. When she saw me, she was startled, stared at me for a long time, then looked away expressionlessly. David was the first to stand up, pulled me to the table, and said, "Brother, don't be mad at Mom and Dad. You know I have hypoglycemia. Seeing that you didn't come back, they were worried I'd starve, so they didn't wait for you." My mom said with a cold face, "Ignore him. He's the one who's not punctual. Who else can he blame?" I smiled and said, "Then I'll leave." My mom glared at me viciously, gritted her teeth, and said, "Come with me." I slouched after her into the kitchen and asked, "So, what's the matter?" My mom hesitated for a moment and then said, "David is going to get engaged to Sophia." I was stunned and didn't say anything. The next second, she couldn't wait to continue. "Originally, Sophia liked David. It was you who were shameless and insisted on competing with David for her. Now that David is back, shouldn't you return Sophia to him? Besides, Sophia doesn't like you. It's time to end things between you and Sophia. Also, you're not allowed to tell David. He doesn't know about the messy things between you two yet." I was speechless. In fact, I've doubted countless times whether I'm their biological child. So when I was a kid, I took their hair and did a paternity test with mine. The result was disappointing. Alas, what a pity. My distraction annoyed her. She demanded, "Did you hear what I said clearly?" I opened my mouth, about to speak, when David opened the kitchen door. He looked curious. "Mom, what are you secretly telling brother? Why are you hiding it from me? I want to hear too." My mom's expression changed 180 degrees in an instant. She smiled gently and said, "Your brother said he brought you a gift." As she spoke, she pushed me. David looked at me expectantly. "Brother, really?" I curled my lips and smiled. "A gift? Are you brave enough to take the gift from your brother?" David's face froze, remembering some not-so-pleasant past events. My mom wanted to say something else, but I had already resolutely walked towards the living room. After all, I still had important things to do. What a sumptuous meal. All these dishes on the table are David's favorites. I looked at Sophia with a menacing expression. Sophia was so scared that she stood up, took a few steps back, and asked me nervously, "What's wrong with you? What happened?" I glanced at her and said with a smile, "I'm fine. Never been better." I held the edge of the table and tried to lift it. It was quite heavy. No wonder, it's made of marble. But since I came to this malicious banquet, I was well prepared. So I made a call. "Olivia, come up with a hammer." Less than 10 seconds after hanging up the phone, Olivia burst in. She asked me, What are you going to do? I raised my chin and said, give it to me. Suddenly, someone shouted, James, you dare. I couldn't tell who it was, probably Sophia and my mom's voices. I picked up the hammer and was about to smash it when my dad and David grabbed my hand tightly. At that moment, Olivia seemed to suddenly understand and said, you should have said so earlier. The next second, she raised her fist high and then brought it down as fast as the wind. With just one blow, the marble tabletop cracked from the point where her fist landed and the crack spread quickly like a spider's web all over the table. After that, there was a continuous series of crisp sounds. The bowls, chopsticks, plates, and dishes fell and made cracking noises. The soup and dishes splashed everywhere. The whole table was easily smashed by her. The sound was so pleasant. My mom was stunned, my brother was stunned, and Sophia was also stunned. Only I looked at the mess on the floor and smiled with satisfaction. She is indeed a bodyguard with strong military strength. She must pay more when she goes back. I met Olivia at the security booth. She was wearing a delivery person's uniform, trying to persuade the security guard to let her in to deliver food. So I asked, aren't you a runner? She chuckled and said, it's all the same. I asked her, are you short of money? She nodded. So I asked her to get in the car. I originally wanted to fulfill our previous verbal agreement and give her a job. So I left the hammer downstairs first to avoid arousing suspicion and asked her to wait in the car for my call. I never expected she had such skills. My mom wanted to rush up and hit me, but was stopped by Olivia. Auntie, do you want to try my slap? My mom covered her face and took 2 or 3 steps back. James, are you crazy? David supported my mom and shouted angrily, brother, apologize to mom now. I looked away and said to Olivia, let's go. With Olivia's help, no one dared to come forward again. But when Olivia and I were about to walk out of the front yard, Sophia chased after us. Her eyes, over Olivia's shoulder, stared at me intently. She asked, James, who is she? I put my arm around Olivia and said to her, what do you think? Sophia's face looked ugly. I turned to leave, but she spoke again. David said he wants to be with me. I paused and replied, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Sophia then asked, James, don't you have anything else to say? I smiled and said, I'll send you a gift when you get married. Sophia smiled, but it looked worse than crying. Watching Sophia's retreating figure, Olivia rubbed her palms and said, I don't know why, but I think this person is so pretentious. I was silent for a while, then asked nervously, how can you be so strong? Olivia clenched her fist and waved it beside her blushing face. If I hadn't just seen her smash the table with one punch, I would have thought she was acting cute. Olivia said proudly, don't look down on women. Let me tell you, I've been to China. I know Muay Thai, Judo, and Taekwondo. Looking at Olivia's lively appearance, I was curious. What kind of family would raise such a child? I asked her, do you want to be my personal secretary? Olivia blinked and asked back, personal? How personal? Is it a proper secretary position? I was speechless. Olivia shrank her neck and changed the question, so, what's the salary? I asked, how much do you want? Olivia held out a palm. I asked, 50,000? Before she could wave her hand, I said, fine. Olivia's eyes widened in an instant. I looked at her in confusion and asked, what were you going to say? Olivia suddenly hugged me, tightly wrapping her arms around mine, and rubbed against my clothes, changing the subject, from now on, you're my bread and butter. I promised to be on standby 24 hours a day. I felt like a tightly bound noodle and said helplessly, I got it. Let go. We can talk things over. After this incident, I guess the days ahead may not be peaceful. I know what my parents and younger brother are like, and I can probably anticipate their tricks. With Sophia as a variable, I just hope they don't act too impulsively. At 11 o'clock at night, I had just finished a video conference, poured a glass of red wine, and was about to drink it and go to sleep when a friend called. He said, what's going on? Why is David with Sophia and they even kissed in public? Didn't you propose to her? I was puzzled by his overreaction and asked, wasn't David with her as soon as he returned to the country? He said, but at that time, Sophia said she regarded David as a younger brother and asked us not to talk nonsense. So there was this episode? No wonder this questioning came so late. But it's understandable. Presumably, David hadn't given Sophia a clear signal, and she didn't want to put David in a difficult position. Now that David's attitude has softened, Sophia must be eager. Once I figured this out, I felt relieved. I asked, are all the guys there? My good friend replied, yes. Are you coming? I took a sip of red wine and continued, I won't go. Put your phone on speaker. I have something to say. Not many people knew about my proposal to Sophia. Besides our parents, it was just this group of friends. Now it's really time to clarify, otherwise it always seems like I've been cuckolded. So I said, Sophia and I are over. From now on, we're free to marry or not, and have nothing to do with each other. After that, I hung up the phone directly, not caring whether David heard it or not. If they want to hide it from David, that's their business. Anyway, I didn't ask them to do so. Besides, I don't believe David really doesn't know. I drained the wine in one gulp, coughed loudly, and was just about to go back to my room to sleep when I heard a commotion outside. It's the middle of the night. Are they disturbing the neighbors? I opened the door, ready to flare up, but saw Olivia's beaming face. James, good evening. I asked, what are you doing? She pointed to the house opposite mine and said, moving in. I rubbed my temples with a headache and asked, moving in? Olivia nodded repeatedly. How can I be your personal secretary if I don't live with you? What if you have some instructions when I'm not around? I wanted to say she was overthinking, but looking at Olivia's expectant eyes, I hesitated. So I beckoned and asked, how much is the rent? I'll reimburse you. Olivia didn't hesitate and immediately handed me the rental contract. I was defeated by her sincerity and straightforwardness. Then I said, be quiet. I'm going to sleep. Olivia zipped her mouth, gave an okay sign, nodded heavily, looking like I could trust her. I sighed and closed the door. I thought I might hear some noise, but it was so quiet that I fell asleep peacefully. The next day, I took Olivia to the company. When my assistant saw her, his eyes widened. Seeing his over-imaginative look, I immediately explained, from now on, she'll be by my side as my personal secretary. Enter her information. The assistant nodded repeatedly and secretly gave Olivia a thumbs up. When we passed the office area, everyone's eyes were drawn to Olivia. With her gorgeous appearance and tall figure, following me closely, the employees were whispering and couldn't hide the smiles on their faces. Without hearing what they were saying, I knew what they were thinking. And Olivia, with a carefree look, was also laughing heartily behind me. I asked, what are you laughing at? Olivia said, everyone is laughing. It would be out of place if I didn't. I was speechless. You're really naive and cute. But the facts proved to everyone that my secretary was not the kind they thought. During the morning meeting, my mom and David tried to barge in, but were stopped by Olivia. After seeing Olivia, they obediently followed her to my office, allowing me to finish the meeting completely. When I returned to the office, my mom hysterically asked, what on earth do you want to do? Are you trying to force me and David to death? Didn't you promise me not to tell David about your relationship with Sophia? I said, I didn't promise that. I looked at David and continued, and how do you know he doesn't know? David raised his head, meeting my gaze, half questioning and half resentful. Brother, you knew Sophia loved me, yet you took advantage of her vulnerability. Don't you think it's despicable? I took a step forward and demanded, were you married to her at that time? He replied, no. I asked again, were you together with her at that time? David stammered, well, not yet, but. I asked again, who was she to you at that time? Was she your girlfriend or your wife? He was speechless and said in a low voice, neither. I sneered and retorted, since you had no relationship with her, how dare you question me? What I did with her has nothing to do with you. Who do you think you are? Weren't you off pursuing your love? What, do you want to keep a backup even after getting married? A useless person like you, who can't tell good from bad and is indulgent and promiscuous, actually wants to pretend to be affectionate and jump around here questioning me. I suggest you take a piss and drain the water in your head. Every time you think, it stinks. People might think you're playing with mud in your head. David's face turned red, and his body was trembling. It took him a long time to say, it's you. It's all your fault. Sophia said you forced her. I asked, she said that? David raised his chin and said, yes, she told me herself. I laughed and said, fine. Then let Sophia sue me, call the police. Don't be afraid. You take her there, right now, immediately. Do you need me to drive you? James, do you have no shame? My mom roared and stepped forward, raising her hand to hit me, but I grabbed her wrist and she couldn't move. David shouted angrily, you even dare to hit Mom. You're a fatherless and motherless bastard. He put on an act, raising his fist to hit me, but when he saw Olivia's bright, expectant eyes, he froze in place. I shook off my mom's hand, looked at the time, and asked, is there anything else? Do you want to leave on your own, or should I call security to escort you out? After this big show ended, I thought I could at least have a peaceful day, but the assistant came in a hurry and said, Sophia rejected the cooperation plan submitted a week ago. I lowered my voice and asked, what's the reason? The assistant shook his head, no reason. I said, then submit it again. But it was rejected again. Obviously, Sophia was doing it on purpose. I called her, what do you want? She said slowly, if you want to talk, come here yourself. Olivia drove me to the downstairs of Sophia's company. She stuffed an alarm into my pocket and for the first time said to me with a serious expression, press this. Wait for me for 10 seconds. I asked speechlessly, 10 seconds? Can you fly? Besides, it's not a dangerous place I'm going to. After all, I thought that in business, no matter how big the conflict is, there are still limits. In the office, Sophia said slowly, your dad wants to return to the company. As long as you step down as the president and transfer the company to your father, all the cooperation between our two families will remain the same. I looked at Sophia silently and asked, is this also David's request? Sophia frowned unhappily, what does this have to do with David? Sophia, I said, I built this company step by step, and you know it was my grandpa's life's work. But you still want to do this, don't you? Sophia pursed her lips tightly and said, why are you always so stubborn? You clearly know that if you take a step back, your relationship with your family can be eased. Why do you have to make it like this? James, I'm doing this for your own good. I promise that as long as you give up the company, I will mediate and make Uncle and Aunt forgive you. In fact, I didn't really need to do this. Once we got married, you would be. I could barely hear what Sophia was saying. The word forgive alone left me stunned. So I said, wait. What did you say? Forgive me? Why should they forgive me? Do they have the right to forgive me? Sophia, do you even hear what you're saying? There are some things I don't like to think about, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten. My name is James. I took my grandpa's surname. My grandpa married into David's family. He and my grandma loved each other deeply and managed the family business diligently. He didn't care what his son's surname was. But my grandma felt guilty. After my mom gave birth to me, she suggested that I take my grandpa's surname. My parents agreed without hesitation. My mom left me with my grandparents and went abroad freely. My grandma regretted it later, thinking that her idea had hindered my relationship with my parents. In fact, it wasn't that. My parents didn't love me. They didn't even want to have me. At that time, they were traveling around the world and accidentally got pregnant with me. Originally, they wanted to have an abortion, but the pregnancy was too far along and it would harm my mom's body. The repeated morning sickness tortured her to the point of emaciation, and the stretch marks in the later stages almost drove her to the verge of a breakdown. What's more, she had a difficult labor when giving birth to me, and had to switch from a vaginal delivery to a cesarean section, suffering twice the pain during one childbirth. My mom said I was here to collect a debt, that she couldn't bring herself to like me, and that she got annoyed just looking at me. There was nothing I could do about it. It wasn't until I was 3 years old that they returned to the country after having their fill of fun. My grandma encouraged me to get close to my mom, but she pushed me away and said, don't touch my dress. Why are you so dirty? You're so disobedient. I don't know how your grandparents taught you. You're clearly an ungrateful person, impossible to tame. It would be better to have another child. And so, David was born, eagerly anticipated by our parents. David was the apple of my parents' eyes, so precious that I wasn't even allowed to get close to him, otherwise, I'd get slapped. They would say, what are you holding? Who told you to come up here? Are you trying to poke David's eyes? How could you be so vicious? I wasn't. I just wanted to touch his face. But faced with my hysterical mother, I was so scared that I didn't even dare to defend myself. My dad forced me to apologize to my mom and my brother. It was my grandparents who protected me. My grandma was so angry that she was trembling. She said, impossible. I raised this child. I know what kind of person he is. My dad tried to smooth things over, saying, even if it's not his fault, so what? She's his mom. What's wrong with him apologizing? You've spoiled him too much. What's wrong with him? How is he spoiled? I raised him well. Why does he become a bad child in your mouth? My dad wanted to say more, but my grandpa stepped forward and said, James is not at fault and he won't apologize to anyone. If you keep making trouble, take the child and get out of this house. My grandma told me it was okay. Even if my parents didn't love me, she and grandpa would always love me. My grandpa told me that if I wanted to truly let go, I had to first take things on. How could I let go if I didn't take them on? Don't be afraid of pain. The pain of cutting through the mess with a sharp knife is easier to endure than the pain of being tortured slowly like with a blunt knife. I was once held dear, but after my grandma passed away, they tricked me into going abroad. They locked up my grandpa and forced him to change his will. My dad said to my grandpa, "I'm your biological son. I'm not dead yet. Why are you leaving the company to James? You're being too unfair. Even if you want to give it to James, shouldn't David also get a share?" During that darkest moment, I called out to heaven and earth, but no one answered. I struggled and begged, only hoping that one day I could return to my grandpa's side. It was that day, a rainy day. The rain filled my shoes, and water droplets dripped onto me from the gaps in the eaves. I was freezing cold, soaking wet, and starving. I felt like my head was splitting, and I was dizzy. I thought I might be on the verge of death. But then I saw Sophia. The fine raindrops wet her eyelashes, forming crystal clear droplets. Her eyes were clear, yet carried an indescribable sadness. She walked towards me slowly, holding a small purple umbrella in her hand, and sheltered my head with it. At that moment, the sound of the rain faded away, and it seemed as if only the two of us were left in the world. She said, "I've come to find you, James." It was Sophia who found me and brought me back to the country. She took me to my grandpa's bedside. Grandpa took my hand and asked, "Do you want the company?" I said, "Grandpa, you'll be fine. You'll get better." Then, he stroked my head and continued, "Whether you want it or not, Grandpa can only give it to you and must give it to you. James, this company is the hard work of your grandparents. Will you guard it for us?" After Grandma passed away, Grandpa didn't last long. The 2 funerals almost took a toll on me. But they still didn't let me go. My mom forced me to sign a share transfer contract, threatening to send me to a mental hospital for electroshock therapy if I didn't. I refused to give in, so they tortured me, locking me in the basement and only giving me a meal and a glass of water every 3 days. It was Sophia again. She secretly brought me food through the basement window every now and then. When my parents tried to send me to a mental hospital on the grounds of mental illness, she pleaded with her parents to help me. During that time, she stayed with me and told me over and over again, "You're not sick. Don't let others think you are." But now, this very Sophia was telling me that I should ask them to forgive me. At this moment, I laughed heartily at her. In an instant, it was as if the sky was cleared and the earth was cleansed. My mind had never been so clear. Sophia stared at me blankly and asked, "What's wrong with you?" She suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my hand, saying, "That's not what I meant. I just thought that, after all, your family, and you." I didn't want to listen to her. I was so angry that I said, "Get out." Sophia looked at me in disbelief and asked, "You're telling me to leave?" "Yes, leave." I pushed away the hand she was holding mine with. Unexpectedly, Sophia's face turned cold. She went back and sat down at the table. With a command, she said, "Hold him down." The security guards outside rushed in. Only then did I realize that they had no bottom line. I struggled wildly, like a madman. All those unbearable experiences in the past, the medicine injected into my body, the repeated electroshocks, the closed iron door, and the restraint straps that bound my hands and feet all came to mind. I picked up a medium-sized potted plant next to the coffee table, swept it around with the branches, creating a safe distance. Then I stepped onto the sofa and jumped over. I originally wanted to rush across the boss's desk and grab Sophia as a hostage, but she crouched down and moved to the other end. At this time, they surrounded me again. I had no choice but to step onto the table and turn around to strike at the person climbing up. He didn't react in time, and clutching his head in pain, he backed off. Taking advantage of not being completely surrounded, I jumped down from the other side and pressed myself tightly against the wall to avoid being attacked from all sides. At this moment, I had a brief chance to catch my breath. With my right hand, I held the potted plant and swung it at the approaching people from time to time to block their steps. With my left hand, I reached into my pocket to search for the alarm. Just as Sophia shouted, "There's only one of him. Can't you 7 or 8 people hold him down? Do you want to be fired?" They rushed at me, knocked the potted plant out of my hand, and pushed me against the wall. I finally found and pressed the alarm at the bottom of my pocket. 10, 9, 8, 7. Olivia had said it only took 10 seconds. 6, 5, 4. I was pressed to the ground by the security guards. Sophia looked down at me, the heel of her high-heeled shoe hovering over my hand. She asked coldly, "What did you say just now?" I looked at her and continued counting, 3, 2. Bang! With a loud noise, the office door was smashed open by an external force. I turned my head and saw Olivia, looking beautiful and heroic. She maintained the posture of a reversed punch and dropped elbow. The fist she had just swung was in front of her, and a big hole was smashed in the middle of the wide open door. Everyone's eyes were drawn to her. Sophia froze and took several steps back. Olivia looked at us playfully, her eyes twinkling like stars, and said, "It's so lively here." Without waiting for them to react, she rushed to my side in a few steps, threw the security guards holding me away, and kicked Sophia out with one foot. She looked down at me and asked, "James, are you okay?" I gritted my teeth and said in a trembling voice, "Let's go." I knew I had lost my composure. I was almost dragged away by Olivia. Behind us, Sophia shouted, "James, you dare to leave." Olivia took me to her home on her own initiative. The house was simply decorated, without any adornments, and looked devoid of warmth. Olivia walked around inside and out, and finally took out a can of beer. She scratched her head and said awkwardly, "I originally wanted to find something else for you, but this is all I have. Maybe you should go back." Before she could finish, I took the beer from her hand and said, "This is fine." I didn't really want to go home, even though my home was right across the street. At this moment, I didn't want to be alone. Olivia, who was usually talkative, was uncharacteristically silent. She accompanied me in drinking can after can of beer until we were slightly tipsy. I started talking about Grandpa's instructions before his death, about the decline of the family. The company that my parents had long coveted was actually already in decline. By the time I took it over, my father had ruined it beyond recognition. I was struggling desperately. I was really tired, but I didn't dare to relax, for fear of disappointing Grandpa and Grandma, and of them getting angry with me. Olivia suddenly said, "But actually, have you ever thought that your grandpa wasn't just concerned about the company? He just wanted to protect you. You were just starting college then, and your parents treated you badly. Without the company as a shield, how would you have grown up? Would you have been bullied? Would they have hurt you? Although one must bear the weight when wearing the crown, precisely because of the crown's protection, those people didn't dare to do anything to you. So, your grandpa probably didn't care about the company itself. He only cared about whether you grew up well." I was stunned. The look of heartache and reluctance on Grandpa's face before his death appeared in front of my eyes. It was as if he was saying to me, "James, Grandpa can't protect you anymore. What are you going to do?" My voice trembled slightly as I murmured, "No one has ever said this to me, and I've never thought about it this way. Everyone thinks I'm the beneficiary, but I feel like I'm shouldering a heavy burden. That feeling of being physically and mentally exhausted has been weighing on me. But now, suddenly someone tells me that they're still protecting me, even after they're gone, still protecting me in their own way." I sat on the living room carpet all night. Olivia didn't comfort me or persuade me. She just sat opposite me and never left. Until the sky started to get slightly bright, I murmured to her, "How did you manage to arrive in 10 seconds? Olivia said, "I was following you all the time. I told you I'm your personal secretary. How could I let you go up alone?" Sophia did as she said. She started to comprehensively target my company's business, not caring if it was a Pyrrhic victory. The board of directors pressured me again and again. On the contrary, my parents suddenly became quiet, waiting quietly to reap the benefits. David came to me, pretending to be kind and consoling, "Brother, don't blame Sophia. She did all this for me. Dad is getting old, and Mom and Dad have been for so many years. I just want them to have a comfortable old age." At that time, I was too busy to even give him a glance. I just told Olivia, "Throw him out." David said angrily, "James, there will come a day when you beg me." I thought to myself, me beg him? Impossible. Sophia gradually undermined my power. I didn't resist. Everyone thought I was like a grasshopper in late autumn, with no ability to jump around anymore. But they didn't know that I had been busy making money recently. All the business that Sophia blocked was snatched up by an investment company named Thunder. The reason I stayed here without leaving was to wait for those key employees who had submitted their resignations and wanted to leave with me. I sighed and said to Olivia, "I really envy those rich second-generation people. As long as they don't foolishly start a business, they can live off their family wealth. As a rich third generation, I feel so helpless." Olivia looked at me curiously and asked, "Why?" I pouted and said, "Haven't you heard the saying wealth doesn't last 3 generations? So what are you going to do?" I shrugged and said, "Since I can't live off my family wealth, I can only strive to become a lonely and cold-hearted wealthy person." Olivia rolled her eyes and said, "You poor thing." I suddenly stepped forward. She shrank back and said, "What are you doing?" I opened Olivia's collar and took a look. There was a dark red hickey. I was suspicious and asked, "It's been a few days. Why hasn't it faded?" Olivia's face turned green. She slapped my hand away and bluffed, "Have you no shame? What do you think you're doing in broad daylight?" I said innocently, "What else could I be doing except caring about you?" Olivia's earlobes turned bright red, and she said, I don't need your false kindness. How am I being falsely kind? She snorted, if you were really kind-hearted, why didn't you stop when I said no? I asked speechlessly, when a girl says no in bed, doesn't it mean yes? Olivia stared at me and said, when I say no, I mean no. I replied with a smile, okay, I'll pay attention next time. It seemed natural for Olivia and me to sleep together. After she fed me for a week in a row, one night, she made a big meal. We drank wine, she kissed me, I hugged her, and then we made love passionately. The day I was removed from my position, the weather was sunny and pleasant. My dad was beaming, waiting for me to step down. He said, "Boss, please." I nodded and stood up. Those key employees who had been waiting to leave responded in unison and stood up to follow me. The scene was really cool. I had been waiting for this moment. I have to say, it felt great. My dad's face changed. What's going on? The obsequious manager immediately stepped forward and said, they're all useless people. When they submitted their resignations, I approved them. My dad looked at me suspiciously. I grinned at him and said, you've offended me. This is like cutting your own main artery. They wouldn't notice anything immediately, but the company's collapse was just a matter of time. The day I left the company, Sophia was waiting for me downstairs. She said, come with me. I'll help you make a comeback. I looked at Sophia in confusion and asked, why do you think I'll go with you? Sophia frowned and said, don't be like this. Although you have nothing now, but I. Before she could finish, Olivia suddenly appeared, leaned against me without hesitation, pressed her face against my chest, and glared at Sophia fiercely, shouting, I've said it. This is a society ruled by law. Don't touch my man. After saying that, Olivia pouted and looked at me with a wronged expression. James, didn't you say you'd be responsible for me? Her eyes made it seem like I was a heartless man. I smiled and rubbed Olivia's head, saying, I will be responsible. I'll be responsible for you to the end. Sophia's eyes turned red. She stared at Olivia and me and said, you're together with her? You lied to me, right? I don't believe it. I waved my hand and said, Sophia, don't pester me anymore. But she didn't give up. She stepped forward to pull me. Olivia turned around and raised her small fist. I quickly said, don't. Olivia glared at me and said, you're protecting her? I said helplessly, I'm protecting you. Do you want to go to jail? If you go to jail, who will cook delicious food for me? I pulled Olivia and was about to leave. Sophia shouted, James. I looked back at her. Her eyes were full of resentment and pleading. If you dare to leave with her, it's really over between us. Over? I laughed out loud. Sophia, when you helped them deal with me, there was no more affection between us. I didn't want to listen to Sophia anymore, and neither did Olivia. She childishly covered my ears and hung onto me. I laughed inside, then picked Olivia up in my arms. In fact, Thunder Company was mine. I never thought of hiding this. It was within my expectation that Sophia could find out. When she burst into my office, her face was flushed, and her eyes were full of disappointment and grievance. James, you've been lying to me. I asked, what have I lied to you about? She gritted her teeth and spat out 2 words, thunder. Sophia, you should have investigated thoroughly before coming to me. Thunder was founded by me 3 years ago. I told you about my expectations, plans, and dreams, but you didn't take it to heart at all. Sophia looked blank. Obviously, she had long forgotten. She said, but the company was given to you by your grandpa. How can you just ignore it? I found it ridiculous. Get it straight. Is it me ignoring it? You guys forced me out. Sophia said, looking aggrieved, I didn't really want to force you away. You just wanted to force me to yield. My words made Sophia's hands, which were hanging by her sides, clench tightly. I continued, you know I'm not someone who gives in easily, so you used the things I care about most to control me. I can figure all that out. The only thing I don't understand is, why did you do this? Sophia shook her head in a hurry. No, I was just angry with you. I hoped you would give in and coax me, then come back to me. We were about to get married, but you suddenly said it was over. James, why are you treating me like this? Why are you betraying me like this? Her words were so absurd that they left me stunned. Before I could say anything, David rushed in, looking furious and trying to hit me. Sophia blocked him in front of me. What are you doing? His eyes were blazing with anger as he questioned me. Did you force Sophia to come here? Stealing a woman from your own brother? What kind of scum brother are you? Do you think she brought you back from abroad because? Sophia looked at him in horror and reached out to cover his mouth. Don't say anything more. If you say one more word, it's over between us. David looked angry. Sophia, what's wrong with you? Are you really going to break up with me for James? This farce made me laugh. My laughter seemed to enrage David even more, and he roared like a madman, "Do you think you've won and are feeling proud?" I nodded seriously and replied, "I'm happy to see you're not doing well." David's eyes turned red with anger. He said furiously, "Do you really think Sophia likes you? Do you know that the so-called salvation you thought you had back then was actually for me? Stop talking. Shut up." Sophia slapped David hard. She was trembling all over and looked at me in a panic. "It's not like that, James." David seemed to be expecting me to break down, and Sophia looked at me with caution, but I felt nothing inside. I said, "I've known for a long time." When someone asked Sophia why she brought me back from abroad, if she had fallen for me, she said no. She said there was no way she would care about whether I lived or died. She was just afraid that if I died, the investigation might lead to David's parents and cause trouble for David. I recorded this and have listened to it over and over again on my phone. As I said this, I played the recording for Sophia. Her face turned deathly pale in an instant. "Why? Since you knew, why did you still be with me?" I leaned back in the chair, thinking about how to answer this question. Then I continued, "Maybe I was too young at that time. I lost 2 relatives at the same time and was betrayed by the remaining family members. I felt like I couldn't go on living. But if I wanted to live, I had to find something to rely on. No matter why you were good to me, you were good to me after all, so I fell for you. But, Sophia, loving you was a losing game from the start. So what could I do? Grandpa taught me to be able to take things on and let them go since I was a kid. To be able to let go, one first has to take things on. So I thought, how could I let go of you? First, I had to have you." Sophia took 2 uncontrolled steps backward. "Are you trying to tell me that every day you were with me was just for the sake of leaving me?" I looked at her in silence. She shook her head and shouted, "I don't believe it. You love me. You clearly love me. What the hell are you barking about?" The office door was kicked open. Olivia's bag flew in before her and hit Sophia. Sophia let out a muffled groan and took 2 steps back. I quickly stepped forward and hugged Olivia, who was already lunging forward. She flailed her arms and legs, shouting, "I was only out for 3 hours, and you come to stir up trouble. Aren't you annoying?" Sophia covered her stinging abdomen, and her face looked increasingly ugly. "You're taking revenge on me, right? You 2 aren't together. You're just taking revenge on me, right? Okay, I give up, James. I admit defeat. As long as you come back, I'll promise you anything." Then Olivia said, "Do you want a beating?" Olivia was so enraged that she was even harder to hold back than a wild boar. I looked at Sophia impatiently. "You're overthinking it. There's no revenge. I just don't like you anymore." I didn't look at Sophia's reaction. Olivia, however, laughed. "He doesn't like you anymore. Did you hear that? He's mine." Her tone was extremely smug. In the end, Sophia was escorted out by the security guards, and David, who was sitting on the ground, already scared stiff, was taken away along with her. I didn't have to worry about these things. My main task was to soothe Olivia, who was almost exploding with anger. Olivia crossed her arms over her chest and walked around huffily, saying as she walked, "How did Sophia get up here? The access control downstairs is like a decoration, and those security guards are good for nothing. No, you should fire them all and hire a new batch. I don't believe we can't stop her." I said, "You're making my eyes hurt from all that moving around. Can't you sit down for a while?" She stared at me and said, "I'm annoyed." I sighed and said, "Then let me give you a hug." Olivia stopped in her tracks, hesitated for a second, and then obediently walked up to me. I put my arm around her waist and held her in my arms. Finally, she calmed down. I asked her, "Where did you go?" Olivia said, "I went back to the company for something." Olivia has multiple jobs. Besides being my personal secretary, she also works in a design studio. I later found out that this girl, who seemed like a tough errand runner, actually studied design. I asked curiously, "Olivia, do you want me to invest in you and open a studio for you?" Actually, I have something to tell you." Hearing her hesitant tone, I looked up suspiciously. "What? Did you cheat on me?" She almost jumped up. "How could that be?" "Then what is it?" She picked up the financial magazine on my desk and pointed to the interview on the front page. "You know this person, right? He's my dad. And that design studio is also mine. I'm the rich second generation you mentioned who could live off family wealth but insists on starting a business. Life is really full of surprises. Olivia said that in her dad's eyes, she had always been a problem child. Her dad wanted her to go to business school, but Olivia chose to study design. Her dad wanted her to go abroad for further study, but she came back to learn boxing instead. Her dad wanted her to go back and inherit the family business, but she started her own company. Olivia said, "I'm not deliberately going against my dad. I have my own ideas. Actually, I was born into a privileged position. Whether it's going to school or starting a business, it's all an experience for me. But for many others, it's a matter of survival." I had a classmate who was excellent in school and had big dreams. But when I met her again, she was working as a cashier in a convenience store. Her hands, which could have drawn the most beautiful clothes, can no longer do the work she's best at. I've seen so many girls like her. Because of some choices they made in the past, they lost their opportunities. I just want to give them another chance. I looked at Olivia quietly and asked, "Then why did you work as an errand runner and deliver food?" Olivia said, looking aggrieved, "I ran out of money and couldn't pay the salaries." I asked again, "So you rely on part-time jobs to keep the company running?" Olivia replied, "Yes." Sighing, I looked at this helpless little cat in front of me, stroked her head, and asked, "How's the company doing now?" Her expression became even more gloomy. "Not so well." I said, "Give me the financial statements and an overview of the company's operations." Olivia asked me, "What are you going to do?" "I'll evaluate it. If it's worth investing in, I'll invest in your company in the name of Thunder. If not, I'll do it personally." Olivia put her arms around me and asked, "What if it loses money?" I kissed her and said, "If it loses money, it loses money. It's not like I can't afford it. I just have to work harder." Thunder is developing along the planned track. At the same time, news from my parents kept reaching me. As the saying goes, clean with a new broom. The first thing my dad did was to open a studio for his precious son. It was said that he poached several top-notch agents at a high price, and spent a lot on publicity and promotion, hoping to make his son an instant hit. At the same time, he used his connections to land a big project in cooperation with the government. He was really in his element. My mom held a dinner party, which was extremely luxurious, as if she finally had a chance to show off. Of course, I wasn't on the invitation list, and Sophia didn't attend either. I heard that she and David had a falling out after that incident. One day, Sophia called me when she was drunk. Olivia was operating on her phone and asked me, "Can I block her?" I thought to myself, "You're already doing it," but still nodded. Sophia must have come to look for me. I heard some rumors, but I never saw her in person. I have to say, Olivia is really professional when it comes to keeping people at bay. Because Olivia had been doing a great job, she asked me for a reward, asking me to go with her to meet her parents. I was quite nervous. Fortunately, her mother was very kind, but her father seemed to have something to say but held back. We exchanged contact information. In the car on the way back, her dad sent me a message, asking if I was interested in working for him. Olivia said, rolling her eyes, "He sees that I'm hopeless and wants to poach you to manage the company." Olivia sat in the car and fantasized with me, "He keeps forcing me to go back and inherit the family business every day. When will this end?" I thought for a while and said, "How about we have a child and shift this big responsibility onto the child? Wouldn't that solve the problem once and for all?" Olivia was stunned for 2 seconds, then stepped on the brakes and stared at me stupidly, her face blushing. She asked, "What did you say?" I said, "Solve the problem once and for all." As I said this, I took out the ring I had prepared long ago, opened it, and placed it in front of Olivia. Somehow, I felt a bit nervous myself. Actually, this wasn't the right time or place, but the atmosphere was right, and I didn't want to miss it. So I said, "Ms. Olivia, would you like to marry Mr. James?" Olivia's eyes welled up with tears. She threw herself into my arms and nodded repeatedly, "I do." In the end, something happened to my parents. The mirage they built collapsed in an instant. My dad, although not very good at business, wasn't completely stupid either. But I really didn't expect him to take bribes. Obviously, someone wanted to make a fortune from him before something went wrong and set up a simple trap, and he just walked right into it. $20 million. That's enough to keep him in prison for a long time. My mom came to me and immediately asked me to pay to bail my dad out. I looked at her, finding it funny. He violated national laws. How can I bail him out? My mom said dismissively, "It's just a matter of money. If you don't even want to spend this little money, do you mean you don't want to care about your dad? Your grandpa told you before he died that you couldn't leave us alone." I nodded and said, "Grandpa did say that, but what he said was to at least make sure you don't starve. That's all." And I advise you, at this sensitive time, don't do anything stupid. But she obviously didn't listen. 3 days after I said that, she was taken to the police station. The charges were causing trouble and trespassing. It's obvious that she went to offer bribes and was then reported and arrested on some pretext by the other side. The police contacted me to bail her out. Was the other person kind-hearted and didn't want her to go to jail? Of course not. The official just didn't want to get into trouble. But my mom still thought she was right. I laughed at her stupidity and said, "Go ahead. That way, you two can be together in there." She immediately shut up, grabbed my sleeve, and said, "You won't leave your dad alone, right?" I pushed her hand away and said, "I can't do anything about his business." My mom looked at me angrily and said, "What about the company? That was left to you by your grandpa. You'll take care of it, right?" I looked at her suspiciously and asked, "What did you do?" She avoided my gaze and said, "I didn't do anything. I just heard from others that project was very profitable. They said it was a sure win deal. It's our family's company. It'll be fine, right? As long as you make up the money." I took a step back and looked at her coldly. "That's your own business. It has nothing to do with me." She said again, "But it was left to you by your grandpa. Now it's yours." I said to her, "You have more than one son." She fell silent after hearing this. I originally just wanted to annoy David, but unexpectedly, I gave her a new idea. That night, Sophia called me from a different number. I was about to hang up and block it when she hurriedly said, "David came to me." My hesitation seemed to give her hope, and she spoke very fast. "They came to me, wanting me to help him pay back the money." I refused, James. I refused him. I didn't help him. After a long silence, I said, "You should have helped. If you had, I might have thought more highly of you. After all, you truly loved someone at least once. But now, you don't love anyone." Sophia quickly replied, "James, I love you. I really love you. Come back, okay? I was wrong. I won't contact him or see him again. Come back, okay? Sophia, don't contact me anymore. James, don't be like this," I said, "and don't call my name either." James was the name given to me by my grandparents. It means being broad-minded, being able to carve out my own space even in the most dangerous social environment. Grandpa said that our family's children should be like this. This name is the expectation of those who love me, so I only want those I love and who love me to call me that. Olivia blushed, grabbed my back, and asked, "Then can I?" I moved vigorously, almost crushing her, and asked, "Then do you love me?" She said, trembling, "James, I love you." The sequel of the story is about to begin. This is a privilege only for channel members. If you like it, remember to like the video and share it with your friends. Olivia and James got married in the second year after they met. A lot of things happened that year. For example, James's father was sentenced, the company went bankrupt, and his mother had a car accident, which was pushed by David. After Sophia went abroad due to heartbreak, David finally realized that Sophia would never be with him again. He was scared and wanted to run away, planning to sell all his property and go abroad. But his mother disagreed. She still hoped to continue being a wealthy lady, thinking that as long as she filled the company's financial hole, the company could keep making money. But she didn't know that the company's capital chain had long been broken, and the money she embezzled couldn't be solved just by making up for it. So, this loving mother-son pair had a dispute over money. David pushed his mother out. No one knew if he did it on purpose. Anyway, his mother was hit by a car and flew away. The car fled, and David also ran away. As a result, they missed the best time for treatment, and his mother lost the use of one leg. James secretly sent her to a nursing home. As for David, he was caught at the airport. James and Olivia personally led people to do it. David shouted, "What on earth do you want to do?" James smiled wickedly and said, "Nothing. Just taking you to a place where you'll have food, drink, and a place to live." David was shocked. "Are you going to send me to jail?" I didn't push her on purpose. Olivia looked disapproving. "Jail? Impossible. That's too good for David." After all, they arranged a nice place for David, right next to his mother. From now on, he could just accompany his mom and chat with her. Why not? Of course, David wouldn't give in easily. So James told him, "If you dare to leave the nursing home, I'll send your location to your ex-wife. It's said that she's been looking for you. Choose for yourself, stay with your ex-wife or your mom." David was terrified. His ex-wife was a bit crazy. She either cut herself or others with a knife. If she found him, he would surely be tortured to death. After all, he was the one who had an affair during the marriage. So, he could only obediently accept the arrangement. David originally thought that since his mom was being taken care of and he didn't have to do anything, it wasn't a big deal. But he soon found out he was wrong. His mother had gone mad. She seemed like she had a mental disorder and was always trying to find ways to hit David, saying that it was all his fault that she ended up in this situation. But it wasn't David who hit her with a car. Why should she blame him? She also said, "I wish I hadn't given birth to you. I wish I had only James as my son." David sneered. "Do you think James will acknowledge you? Don't dream. He has a long memory. When he was a kid, you pushed him down the stairs, breaking his leg. You also burned him with a cigarette butt and made him kneel. He remembers all of that." His mother shouted, "It's all because of you. You said James was bullying you. You lied to me." David laughed even harder. "How could a kid like me lie to you? You just didn't like him. Do you know how scared I was when I saw how you treated James? I thought that if you stopped liking me, you might treat me the same way. That's why I tried so hard to frame James, fearing that he would compete with me." The two of them were like crazy people, blaming each other and exposing each other's faults without showing any mercy. Olivia, who was watching the surveillance, felt her heart breaking. She smashed one table after another before she could barely suppress her furious emotions. When they got home at night, Olivia hugged her husband, feeling a sharp pain in her heart. James let her act coquettishly. After he finished his work, he turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Olivia shook her head and said in a muffled voice, "Nothing." James sighed and said, "If it makes you feel bad, don't listen. Why torture yourself?" Olivia froze and said, "You knew again?" James playfully scratched the tip of her nose and said, "You were gone for so long, so I knew something was up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop." James furrowed his brows, then pulled Olivia into his arms and said, "I'm not angry. You don't need to say sorry. I can probably guess what they said. I just don't want you to feel bad after hearing it." Olivia was indeed very sad. She said, "I wish I could have met you earlier." James's heart softened. He said, "It's not too late now. As long as you're here, it's never too late." Olivia hugged him tightly and said, "Don't be sad." James couldn't help but laugh again. He said, "Actually, it's not that bad. The real harm my mom did to me was just those few things. That was when I was a child, and I still longed for my parents' love, so I took the initiative to get close to them. After being hurt a few times, I let go and started avoiding them. Besides, my grandparents stood up for me." James always thought that he wasn't an extremely unfortunate person. Although his parents didn't love him, he had his grandparents, and now he had Olivia. He had suffered hardships and endured pain, but he had also received love and was still being loved. What more could he ask for? Life is always hard to be perfect, but getting one or two good things is enough.